Hi, my name's Michael Crawford. I started tracing our family history 22 years ago in the year 2000. I recently tugged on a small thread hidden in our family tree that never seemed to unstop raveling. I'd like to share a story with you that I wrote based on my research over the past few months. It's a story about a song in a place in the Wild West and our family history connection to that place. So let me begin with the song. In June of 1857, a young music teacher by the name of William Savage Pitts, at the age of 27, was traveling from Wisconsin to Fredericksburg, Iowa, to see his fiancée, Anne Eliza Warren. His stagecoach stopped in a small town called Bradford, Iowa, about 15 miles west of Fredericksburg. While waiting for the stagecoach horses to be changed, he walked down Cedar Street and saw an empty lot. Being a romantic young man, the thought came to him of what a charming setting the spot would make for a church. Returning home to Wisconsin, he wrote the poem Church in the Wildwood, and later set it to music. He put it away in a drawer and forgot it. William and Anne went on and got married the next year, and they lived in Wisconsin. Meanwhile, church members in that small town of Bradford grew tired of meeting in places such as lawyer's office, parishioners' homes, even an abandoned store with no doors or windows. They began making plans to build a church. A family in the parish gave them the property. When Reverend J.K. Nutting arrived, talk of building a church became serious. Limestone was quarried, and by 1860 the foundation was laid. The Civil War slowed the work, but when one family gave trees and another donated the sawing of the lumber, the work really never ceased. By 1862, 5 years after the song was written, the building was enclosed and not a penny had been spent. When it came time to paint the building, the cheapest paint to be found was Ohio mineral paint, which would protect the wood, but which was unhappily brown. By this time, William Pitts returned to Fredericksburg to live with his wife's elderly parents. He went to Bradford to teach a music class, and much to his amazement, he saw that there was a little brown church in the very spot he had imagined when he wrote the song. He went home and found the song and taught it to his class, who sang it at the dedication service. In 1864, the church interior was finally finished, complete with tin ceiling and the first bell in Chickasaw County, which continuously rung when delivered from Dubuque over 100 miles away. Today, over 70,000 weddings have taken place in that church. The song was first recorded by the Weatherwax Quartet around 1910 and caught on quickly, but received its largest audience when the Carter family recorded it in 1932. This song has been sung by Dolly Parton, Charlie Pride, Statler Brothers, Alabama, Loretta Lynn, the Carter family, June Carter Cash and Johnny Cash, Mel Tillis, Rosemary Clooney, Andy Griffith and Don Knotts, Ella Fitzgerald, the Chuck Wagon Gang, the Charleston Trio, Tom Paul and the Glazer Brothers, just to name a few, and most recently by the Mope Quartet. The Mope Quartet is a group of 4 sisters, 3 of them triplets, from Nairobi, Kenya. The triplets graduated with first-class honors at St. Mary's University in San Antonio, Texas, and sang the national anthem in 2015 at Game 4 of the NBA playoffs between the San Antonio Spurs and the Cavaliers. They currently have an album called In the Land of the Lion, which features the song The Little Brown Church in the Vale. Now let me tell you about the place. Now if you search Bradford, Iowa on a map, it will take you here to Franklin County. The original Bradford is located in Chickasaw County outside of Nashua. In 1836, Bradford, Iowa was just an Indian trading post, and Chief Bradford of the Chickasaw tribe was the leader. A band of pioneers from the east came here with a vision of turning this area into the Chicago of the West with its abundance of natural resources: water for mills, trees for lumber, land for grain, and the potential of the railroad coming through town. The first courthouse was built in 1854 and was a primitive log house without a ceiling. Soon they had a grist mill and a sawmill on the nearby Cedar River. There were 4 hotels, general stores, a blacksmith shop, wagon makers, a harness shop, tannery, broom and organ factory, civil engineers, lawyers, a doctor's office, a brewery, a post office, a shoemaker, and a school. A large brick building was built to house the Bradford Academy, one of the first academies in the state of Iowa. It was the equivalent of a high school, and many of its graduates returned to the East Coast to attend college. William S. Pitts, who later became a doctor, was the music director at the academy. At one time, Bradford was the Chickasaw County seat and boasted a population of 1,000 people. In 1857, the county seat was moved from Bradford to New Hampton. The Civil War and bad economy started to take its toll on Bradford. When the railroad chose to bypass Bradford and instead go through nearby Nashua and New Hampton, it marked the beginning of the end of Bradford. The town disappeared by the early 1900s. One article wrote, "Old Bradford is to be wiped off the post office map because no one can be found who is willing to lick stamps." What was once one of the most thriving little towns in Iowa is today scarcely more than a memory. All that is left today is a small museum and the little brown church. Now let me tell you about our family history. So what got me started on this research was on my dad's side of the family. I saw that my great-great-grandfather's obituary stated that he helped build the little brown church in the Vale. When I went to research that church, I never imagined the size of the rabbit hole that I would go down. My great-great-grandfather, James Walter Mitchell, was born in Neversink, New York in 1826. His father, David, was born in Vermont in 1794 and was a teamster. Today we think of a teamster as a truck driver. That name originated from driving a wagon with a team of horses. His family moved from New York to Ohio, then to St. Louis, and later to Chicago. From there, James joined a little band of pioneers in 1855, headed to Bradford, Iowa, at the age of 29 with his 6-year-old son, John Lewis Mitchell. Meanwhile, my great-great-grandmother, Phoebe Held, born in 1838 in Fort Anne, New York, came to Bradford around the same time with her 2 brothers, James and John Held. It's possible that they traveled with that same band of pioneers. At 17, Phoebe was the youngest of 4. James was 23 and John, 19, were wheelwrights at the time and wagon makers by 1860. Now, a little side note, Phoebe also had a sister named Abigail, who at 22 married Edwin Abbey 2 years earlier and moved to Keene, Michigan. Her name became Abby Abbey. A year later, James Walter Mitchell and Phoebe Held were married on July 13, 1856. They had 3 children together born in Bradford: Mildred, James Walter Jr., Ophelia, the oldest of the 3, my great-grandmother, born in 1857, the same year William Pitts first came through town. In 1860, Walter Mitchell was listed as an engineer. In 1870, he was a tanner and currier making leather goods. In 1858, Phoebe's brother John Held married Lydia Billings. John and Lydia had 10 children born in Bradford. 3 died at infancy. The oldest, James Manley Held, was a state legislator from 1927 to 1931 and was instrumental in saving the Little Brown Church after it was abandoned in 1888. Now, on the Crawford side, Lawrence Myers Crawford, LM as he was called, was born in Moores, New York in 1854. His parents, William Crawford and Elizabeth Armstrong, were Irish immigrants. LM's family came to Bradford in 1865 when he was 11 years old, 1 year before his mother's death. 11 years later, on March 21, 1877, Opie Mitchell, age 19, and L.M. Crawford, age 22, were married in Chickasaw County. Their first son was Platt Mitchell Crawford, born in Bradford on April 13, 1880. In 1887, James Walter Mitchell and L.M. Crawford moved their families to Sabetha, Kansas, where L.M. and Opie had 2 more boys, Harold Lawrence and Milo Arthur, my grandfather, Dad's dad. A year later, in 1888, the church was closed until John Held's oldest son, James Manley Held, brought it back to life in 1914. James was also the first grandson of the first church clerk, Sanford Billings, and Caroline Billings, the last church member. On June 15, 1916, a 50-year reunion picnic was held, and guest speakers included Dr. Pitts, Reverend Nutting, and John Held. A full-page news article about the event states that Lydia's father, Sanford Billings, and her husband, John Held, both carpenters, organized a crew of men to cut down the 50-foot oak trees to build the church. The other family members in Bradford include L.M.'s sister, Mary Crawford, who married a Scottish immigrant, Thomas Dalziel. Thomas had brothers that owned farms around Bradford, including Robert and William Dalziel. L.M.'s brother, Arthur Armstrong Crawford, married Edith Cross, and the first 3 of their 7 children were born in Bradford. Several obituaries of family members mention that John Held helped build the Little Brown Church in the Vale. Lydia Billings' brother, Burton Billings, was a lawyer in Bradford. We have many family members that were married in Bradford, born in Bradford, and at least 25 family members buried at the Greenwood Cemetery, including my great-great-grandparents, William and Elizabeth Crawford, great-granduncles and aunts, and many cousins. Greenwood Cemetery is located about a half mile southwest of the Little Brown Church in the Vale.